Hi everyone, it's Catherine. Welcome back to, I nearly said welcome back to Liquid and Lacquered. Back to our A Song of Ice and Fire reread series. As you can tell, I'm still not with it. Hi to Connie in the chat who's talking about, wait now, let me see what she's talking about here. The transporter refueled. And it's got old Dario in it and the 10 who bashed John with the anvil, and she's just given us a commentary on it. It sounds hilarious. I'll have to...
I actually think he left Game of Thrones to star in that film.
The Dario guy?
Yeah. The old, like the original, the one with the real chiseled chin.
The one that everybody liked.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't really like him, but I preferred the new one. But I don't really care about Dario.
Yeah, no, me neither.
I don't know why I even made a comment. I actually don't care. Oh, I lost my chat. Where's my chat? Okay. So tonight we have a John sandwich. Speaking of John, John 4 to John 5. So it's chapter 17 to chapter 21. And yeah, we kind of briefly discussed it before we started nattering. Kind of a very kind of action-packed week, I think. Yeah. Lots of action, especially in the Tyrion chapter, which is George R. R. Martin's horror kind of comes in there. Actually, I should say I don't know if anyone is interested, but I'm reading the Ghost Box that Patton Oswalt put together. It's last year's one, not this year's one. I think I will get this year's one as well. And there are 12 books in the run-up to Halloween, so it's a different horror story every night. Usually, like, some of them are 5 pages, some of them are 14 pages. Then there's the George R. R. Martin one. It's nearly 100 pages or something. It's like...
Yeah, he's pretty prolific, isn't he?
Yeah. I just looked at them before I even opened them. I was like, let me see if I can guess which one is the George R. R. Martin one. But I would recommend it. It's a nice little book. We've been kind of taking turns reading one every evening. But if you want to review that, let me know. I can do that in a couple of weeks. So yeah, next week we'll be reading from Tyrion 6 to The Wayward Bride. That's Asha, isn't it?
Yes.
Right. I like Asha chapters in Dance, actually.
In fact, there's a few named chapters next week. It's I don't know, it sounds a little bit like Tim Burton trilogy. So you've got The Wayward Bride, the Lost Lord, who I think is Victorian. And there's a whole chapter on the Windblown. It's actually called The Windblown. I'm not entirely sure whose point of it. Oh, and that must be Quentin's point of view. It's got it must be.
So I know George started doing this in Storm, right? We had named chapters, did we? We did in Storm.
We had
the Night and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Did he? Was that in Storm? Oh, God.
Oh yeah, Cat of the Canals, and there was one of the Air and Damp Hair chapters was a name.
Terror.
Yeah.
So, because there's so many more in Dance, and we'll probably have a few in Winds as well. Is this like a spoiler thing that he does to prevent, or like I see why he does it with like people who are taking on new identities and things like that, but sometimes it's like just like The Wayward Bride. It's like. Like sometimes I'm just
although I suppose it could be written to make you at this stage to make you believe that that's Arya or something to do with fake Arya, but it's not. It's actually Asha.
Yeah.
It could, I don't know. It could just be a little bit of a red herring or a bit of, I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah, no. Part of me was like, well, if the contents of the book get leaked, figure out what that was. But especially with the Ghost of Winterfell stuff and all that later on.
Yeah, I love that chapter.
Yeah, brilliant chapter. So we've John 4, and so what was your experience of reading these chapters this week?
Well, just a lot. Things are starting to mobilize, aren't they? And again, reading this book, I'm surprised that certain things are either happening earlier than I thought they would be, or haven't happened yet. Like the whole thing with Mance Rattleshirt. It's clear in this chapter that John's picking up on, hang on a minute, this ruby thing. That, you know, I mean, just the fact that Rattleshirt is wearing some sort of ruby amulet bracelet thing, but it seems to have extra light or something, it glows or something like that when it's in proximity to Mel. So John's already beginning to kind of make some sort of connection that the ruby seems to be binding Rattleshirt to Mel. But so I just thought to myself today, well, it must be after Stannis leaves the wall then that he reveals himself. Because Mel stays at the this is all kind of decided, especially with the wall and John, who's staying, who's leaving, who's got, you know, Stannis has got a new mission. Mel's decided to, you know, all the dynamics, the wildlings are now starting to be brought on board to station the derelict and empty castles. So the pace of things is changing a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, I didn't realize there was such. I kind of forgot this is the last time we see Stannis in a John chapter.
Yeah, unless there's another one before he leaves. I don't know.
Because he's gone then by chapter 5, isn't he?
Oh yes, he is. Yes, he is. Yeah.
So I was like, God, it really happened that quickly. It felt like in my head he was there for much longer.
Yeah.
So quite a few John chapters, and I was just kind of wondering between now and then. I was like, okay, apart from, I can't really think what else happens apart from Karstark turning up. What happens for the next 6 chapters in John?
Yeah, well, there's this mounting sense of foreboding in John's chapters from now on. You know, we know what happens at the end of the book, but again, I don't know. I thought that was right at the that chapter, John's chapter, where he's betrayed by the Night's Watch. I think it's like the second to the last chapter, like before.
Yeah.
There's that one, and then the Daenerys one, and then the epilogue.
Like 9 or 10 John chapters in this, and for the life of me, I'm like, God, we're already at chapter 5, and Stannis is gone, and the wildlings are being bought into the fold. What the heck happens next? I can't.
Yeah, I can't remember either.
Karstark stuff, but
yeah, there's the wedding. There's the Alice Karstark and the Thens getting involved. There's
they probably are a bit zippier, the chapters to come. I should say hi and AU. How are you guys? Connie is just telling us all about old Dario and the transporter in the chat there as well. Yeah, so I love the fact that John 4 opens with careful of the rats. It's a great line.
And also Ed referring to his mother as a giant rat. There's all the beginnings of like the whole, you know, the Rat King and serving up your kin as you know. There's just little tiny subtle hints of things that are sprinkled throughout these chapters. Yeah, this whole thing about the food and the inspection of the food store. They made a big. I mean, there was lots and lots of description of the food and where it was stored and how they're just, again, building this sense of foreboding that John feels like, you know, it should be cold in here, but this is unusually cold, as though there's something, you know, kind of supernatural linking to the temperatures. But just the fact that he went into great description about the food and how much food and the rations and how the men would react to not, you know, there was clearly food is a massive important issue in a situation like that, in a scenario like that, and you can feel the, you know, already the wildlings are but there's just a horrible feeling of at any minute it could kick off, or somebody's going to betray someone, or some, you know, but I think it's in his find the next chapter where Jon's talking about the wall is only as strong as the men who defend it. But it just made me wonder whether or not, I mean, they are still fairly well stocked, and the description of the things that they eat sometimes at the wall, it's like Hogwarts, you know. It's kind of like a posh boarding school. They seem to be fairly well provisioned, but they're talking about these lots of useless males with extra wildlings and things like that. But do you think that all of that food will be destroyed at some point?
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
But I think Bowen Marsh is, it could be as well, because Bowen Marsh says we're going to have to start killing horses because it's not going to be enough to keep us all going. That, and even with the wildlings, it's not like even just to keep us going through this winter. It may not even be that all the food will get destroyed, but it may be that will come back to Jon later if he's in control of the North, because it's a theme that we see a lot more now from now on going into Winds, because it comes up a lot with Theon, the Reek chapters especially. There's lots of hints about Littlefinger storing stuff. We're gonna, the guys at the Dread Fort, like they're already turning to eating one another and all that kind of thing. So it looks like it's going to be a huge issue, and who knows what will happen with the Tyrells and the Lannisters. I think the biggest thing will be if the Tyrell stocks are destroyed. That's really
I don't know. I mean, Jon's thinking about the supplies in he's thinking about the supplies around, not the Riverlands, but the Vale, the Eyrie. I hadn't really thought about the provisions in the area, apart from the fact that it takes a lot, you know, they're so high up that it's not particularly accessible, but I suppose.
And then if Daenerys brings, you know, Dothraki screamers and Unsullied, what's she going to feed them with? It's going to be a growing problem, because when George started this series as well, like that was a big issue. Like I remember in the in the late 80s, early 90s, that was like a big topic of conversation. So it seems to be a theme that comes up again and again in the books. So I'm sure he'll come back to it. It's still a big issue in our own world, of course, but it's like they don't really talk about it that much on the news anymore. But it is starvation and hunger is still a huge issue. So how I don't know, maybe the Night's Watch stock will be destroyed. It would be kind of ironic if the men of the Night's Watch are destroyed and the food is okay. And it's not like it turns out, oh, we didn't need that food anyway, because there's not going to be anyone there.
Well, it's kind of, it's sort of in the deep freezer, isn't it? But I'm just thinking if the wall comes down, there's, you know, all that food that they've been stockpiling for such a long time will just completely be destroyed. So if anyone does survive that, which I can't, I mean, just the logistics, like sort of geological thoughts around, you know, if the wall comes down, how much water and flooding, and just like, I don't know how he's going to handle that in the books, because certainly that wall is going to come down.
And it is Jon. I mean, this chapter in particular, the conversation with Stannis. Jon is thinking globally. Stannis is just thinking about him and his respect and his duty. I don't think Stannis is thinking big picture at all. I'm interested in the fact there's a line about Lysa Tully hating Jon that kind of stuck out to me. And she didn't like to think of Jon getting anything. It just made me wonder, because he says Catelyn's sister, there's something about Catelyn's sister didn't like to think of Jon getting anything.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even realise that they met, but he's obviously been to the Vale. They've visited the Vale, and because, you know, she didn't want to feed him, and
like, why did she care about? She didn't seem to be that lovey-dovey with Cat that to to really care.
Yeah.
Especially with Littlefinger, I thought it would be quite amusing for her to have had this happened. But yeah, I don't know if there's anything there. Is that comment more on Ned or on Kat? Like, is it like, does she not like Jon because of Ned, or not like Jon because of what Ned did to Kat, if you know what I mean? Is there something else going on here? Because
maybe.
It may have been that Hoster Tully wanted Ned to marry Lysa, that this was part of the pact, and that maybe Jon Arryn stepped in to take Lysa out of the equation as a kind of a self-sacrifice thing for Ned, so that Ned would get the better sister, if you like.
Yeah.
Maybe Lysa holds it against Ned for not having picked her or something. I don't know. But there's, I don't know, it was just a weird line that was there, because it may have been. Wouldn't Jon Arryn have preferred Catelyn Tully to be the Lady of the Eyrie?
I don't know, because I'm not entirely sure what Jon Arryn's motivations were, what they would have, and how much under the influence he was of Hoster.
I just wonder if you take like it's just something that's been running through my head this last week. Just I wonder was there a sister swap, so that Ned could get like the kind of the sister, maybe.
Maybe.
The Overlords talked to Davos later on, or sorry, not the Riverlords. Yeah, the Riverlords talked to Davos later on, and the way people talk about Northerners in general, even in this chapter, it just like it feels like it may have been there. I don't know what I'm talking about, but maybe. Ned said maybe because, or sorry, Connie said maybe because Ned got to keep his bastard and she was forced to abort hers. That could be it. Yeah, that could be it. Yeah, absolutely. And she also says that old Nan foreshadowed when she mentions that mothers would smother their babies rather than see them starve, or was it so that the others wouldn't take them? No, I think there is that. There's also a thing about men walking out into the old men walking out into the woods and just die so food isn't wasted on them. Yeah. So there's also with Stannis, Jon notes that there's no king's men around Stannis. They're all queen's men. And a mad thought entered my head. I'm full of mad thoughts this week. Is there any chance that Mel would burn Stannis?
Oh, every chance, especially if she's looking at the flames and thinking, "Oh, actually, I've got all this wrong. It wasn't Stannis. It's Jon."
I don't think I've ever heard anyone talk about that as a potential, but I'd actually kind of like that, especially if he kills Shireen.
Yeah, he
may go willingly to his own death if he thought that there was a greater good.
He might do. He might. It's very. There's lots of allusions to the Great North Conspiracy, just around things like, well, the politics is very complex in the North. And it's interesting that Jon seems quite politically savvy, even though, you know, he didn't stand to inherit Winterfell or anything like that. There was no need really for him to have that depth of knowledge. And also, since he joined the, you know, what was he, 15 when he joined the Night's Watch, vowed not to take part in the battles of, you know, in anything that was going on in the Seven Realms. But he seems to know quite a lot about what's going on and what Stannis is. He's giving Stannis pretty good counsel. Yeah.
So, really paid attention to his military education and his geography. politics and economics, a whole lot.
Yeah. So we get the sense that a lot of these northern families are kind of split. Like half the family is allied to the crown through the Boltons, and their allegiance is now to the Boltons as the Wardens of the North. And then you get the Karstarks, who are promising all sorts of things, whereas actually it's not necessarily clear whether or not they've got that decision-making power. And so the Umbers and the Karstarks, we are forced to believe that, we don't know where anybody's allegiances lie at this point, but I was quite impressed by Jon's political savvy of what he thinks they might do, and the best thing to do, and oh my God, if you turn up and do this, that'll be the worst thing you could possibly do. If you're trying to get people to pledge their allegiance, then this is the best way to do it. Honor them, don't force them, don't declare war on them, and this is how to get people to be loyal to you. Interesting that that might come into play. I mean, leadership is something that seemed to suit him quite well. Probably setting up something bigger than his leadership of the Night's Watch.
And bigger than his own role as a leader. That's the big difference between him and Stannis for me at this point. It's at this point in the story where I'm just like, I completely lost faith in Stannis a while ago, but it's like I'm losing the thread on how people can still be Team Stannis at this stage. I don't know, especially the way he speaks about Davos. That Davos could be lost, and it's barely moments given to it. The fact that his hand is probably, God, we don't even know if Davos made it.
Yeah,
it's like oh, okay.
He's pinning a lot, really, isn't he? And he's not. He doesn't seem quite. Yeah, I think I remember having notions that Stannis was this brilliant war strategist and commander, and that he was, he knew how to win a battle. And it's like, actually, he's really coming across where he's taking counsel from a 16-year-old boy who's never had a command position apart from commander of the Night's Watch, but again, not supposed to be meddling around in the affairs of the realm. So
and still criticizing Ned. Like, it's like you're going into the north and you're criticizing the last the last person that kept that place unified. And you can't be doing that.
No.
It's also like Jon is very keen to point out that while people will fight for you, they won't necessarily fight within their families for you.
No.
They won't. No. That doesn't happen in the north. So, that might happen with Baratheon fighting Baratheon in the south, but we don't do that in the north, no matter how bad it gets.
So there's either a lot of families here in the prominent northern houses that are either edging their bets, or they are outwardly, they're coming across as one thing to the Boltons, and behind, we get this later on. I am dying for that next Davos chapter where it's kind of behind the scenes, because that was my favorite chapter this week. The farce at White Harbour.
That's my favorite chapter this week by a mile. By a mile. So Connie says Kingsmen were. Oh, sorry. AU said that Mel would definitely burn Stannis, and she said she knows how to kill lambs without them knowing. She's a bit of a Hannibal Lecter, old Mel. And King's men were around him when he went on the Black Water, were around Stannis. Due to Davos, he lost. He lost. And Septa, hi Septa. Septa Shayna is here. Hard to say if Stannis is not so savvy or if he's keeping it a lot close to his chest. He is hard to read, although I feel like if there was something there, George would let us know. Because with someone like Renly, I feel like we really knew who Renly was because he was very open with Cat. Like he doesn't, like Stannis doesn't need to declare to everybody his intentions, but I think he could let a little bit of himself show to Jon or to somebody that he trusts. But I think that's all I have for this Jon chapter. Do you have anything else?
1,000 wildlings at the wall. And how uneasy Jon feels about Mel being at the wall. There's that reference again to Ned and this potential mystery woman on that side of Westeros, with Stannis telling Jon that he haggles like a fishwife, and wondering who Ned fathered him, like what poor wench she was fathered on. And what else? Is there something else here? Yeah, just important to remember, and this came across really obviously in the TV show, just to remember how much the Umbers hate wildlings.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a really difficult job later on down the line if Jon does make it south to, of the wall to the north, and has anything to do with Winterfell, then that whole relationship with the Umbers, if he's having this uneasy alliance with the wildlings, that's going to be problematic. And also another thing to remember as well, that the history, they're not just bad guys, the Boltons. This goes way back. Again, further, that I think there's another reference later on to something that happened 1,000 years ago.
They're a pact that was made. The families that swore allegiance to the Starks.
Yeah. But also, when they were battling the Starks and the Boltons, the Starks once starved out the Boltons, and this was in relation to the Boltons and the Northern Lords being well provisioned for winter. It took like 2 years to starve them out, but they did starve them out. So that's the kind of thing that runs through family history. We get that later on with the Manderleys and White Harbour. There are things here to remember around vengeance and promises made that go way, 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 way back. So
do you expect wildlings to get Last Hearth then by the end of the book, by the end of the series? Because there's a lot of people think that's what Tormund is going to get.
Maybe, maybe.
That'll be where that'll be where it is. Ellamore's in the chat. Hi, Ellamore. Nice to see you. Sonny wants to know how many wildlings came across the wall. In the TV show, they said 100,000. I can't remember a number coming up. I may have missed it though.
Well, when Jon and Stannis are arguing about who should be taking the wildlings, and Jon says, I'll tell you where you can get your men from, as in the mountain clans, if you leave the wildlings here, because we need to defend the wall. These empty castles need to be, manned, and we need them here. And it's Jon who references that number 1,000. I mean, it's the number 1,000, so of course, but 1,000 men, 1,000 wildlings, which isn't that many.
No, not that many. Ellamore likes my jumper. It's from Zara.
But
it's really big, but it's like just like snuggly because it's getting quite cold here. I need to get like I need to get like a Game of Thrones hoodie, I think. So then we have Tyrion 5.
Yes, another trippy journey on the Shy Maid.
Yeah, there's a lot of references to Tyrion's tongue in this chapter, and how he picks the worst times to reveal things.
Do you think there's some time traveling going on in this chapter?
Time traveling? I hadn't noticed that. I mean, maybe that's why I wore the shirt. I don't know. Maybe unconsciously I did. What kind of time traveling?
They go past the Bridge of Dreams. They see the light, and they see the Bridge of Dreams where the stone men are. They make it past it, and you get all the history and the backstory, and then all of a sudden, it's like this is familiar. We've been here before.
Yeah,
and then
I did write that down. Why does it seem familiar?
Because time traveling. Because they've gone back to where they were. They've already. They should have been like, phew, we got past it. We're past the stone men, unscathed. Everything's fine. That's the position that they should have been in. But they turn round and see this light again, and it's like, hang on a minute. And then Tyrion thinks, everything. He gets this sense that he's seeing certain markers and things in the water that's like, this seems familiar. This is, and then we see this. I think somebody says this can't be happening, and one of the I don't know, Isilla and the couple that work the boat, saying, nobody knows what you know nothing. Mother Royne is unusual and blah blah blah. It's like this is really peculiar, because they'd already got past this danger and now they're immediately facing it again. And the fact when they're shouting to that other boat, the Kingfisher, and they were like, this really strange code of like up, down, and it was I don't know. There's just, things seem to be going in a really wacky direction. You get that whole sense of it's on something unnatural is happening. There's this thick fog. There's weird things in the water that seem like they describe as white snakes, which to me seems like I don't know. I always think the description of white snake to me is like weirwood root.
Yes, we get it in the Dreadfort later as well.
Yeah. So it's, and also the fact that it's kind of promoting, it is like being on drugs. Tyrion's thinking deeply about Tysha and about how Jaime was his protector, and he doesn't know he starts to unravel a bit and think, I can't figure out who's betrayed me and what happened in that situation. And then it's like, where are we? Here we are. And then
there's actually a structural shift in the chapter as well, because it moves from prose to direct address. So you almost it feels like he's talking directly to Tysha, because he refers to her as you, and it's like, wait a minute, what's going on? This is weird.
It jumps around a lot, this chapter, but there's a feeling of that it's not because it's messy, it's because there is a deliberate reason why that's happening. And there's some skip going on, whether it's a time skip or a direction skip, or just there's something, and I don't know whether that's to represent some sort of magical vortex in that specific location, or
it might be like the ferryman, like you have to pay your price. A price has to be paid to pass through that area. So like Sonny says, the stone man don't get them the first time they pass the bridge, but the stone men do get them the second time. And Connie says, like, they've actually stood still, yet time was the only thing that passed. There's kind of that scene in Beetlejuice where they walk at some point away from the house but end up back at the house. I think it's Beetlejuice. There's like they can't leave really. They're just kind of they're caught in like
tied to it. Yeah.
But yeah, it is very, very trippy, the whole thing. Also, it kind of, there's something Willy Wonka-ish about it as well. Do you know when they go through the tunnel?
I was thinking like Alice in Wonderland
There's no way of knowing which way we are going. And then, because Tyrion, like, it feels like they're in the midst of this storm of stone men. Yeah. And this is the time Tyrion decides to grill Aegon and like throw all this stuff at him, and it's like, this is really, why are you picking this time? This is inappropriate.
Well, we get a little bit more information about Grayscale and the Stone Men. So Tyrion's I don't know whether this is just his deduction or whether this is something that's, you know, it's written in the books or whatever, but that it's to do with the water and damp, and that's what changes the skin to stone. It was like, I don't know if that's necessarily true. They get, if children get grayscale but survive it, they never go on to get the full-blown version as adults.
Like chicken pox and
it is a little bit like chicken pox. Yeah, I'm sure it would affect your fertility as well. But then you get this, so that it's called another description for grayscale is Garen's curse, which sounds very, 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 very similar to Garion. So I can kind of understand why people would make that leap. And of course, Uncle Garion has been mentioned several times. But there is a shrouded lord that rules this particular area, and it's it's like an inherited title when one shrouded lord dies, I presume of grayscale, and it just seems to get, they get more violent and incoherent, and just, the more advanced the disease gets. But they somebody else will rise up and take their place. So there is always a shrouded lord. It's a title. It's like Sword of the Morning, I guess. And then there's this reference to an old story about a grey woman who comes out of the mist and kisses the shrouded lord. That's a massive reference to Cat.
Yeah.
And possibly Dondarrion.
Shayna has a great question, and it actually, I had a similar question myself, Sept to Shayna. Is there any chance that Tyrion is not just confused / an unreliable narrator, duplicate landmarks? How much of this is actually a shared experience? And just following on from that, Shayna, I wondered, is there something in Tyrion's past that he has completely forgotten, that he has been either made to forget or repressed in some way? Because the way we've talked about this before, time-wise with Tyrion, certain memories don't add up properly. The Tysha stuff doesn't really add up properly.
Yeah.
They're married, I think, for a way longer time than he seems to remember, or than he can account for.
Yeah.
This stuff with Jaime coming back to him, we get more details every now and again, and it's like it comes back to him in waves.
Yeah.
And then the stuff with Tywin as well, like thinking, like it's almost like he's back there, the way he can hear the echo of Tywin's arse hitting the privy and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, and he think, can you hear me, father? What do you think of this, father? And it's very I don't know. It's like there may be some weird implanted memories there with Tyrion.
Well, there's another thing with Tyrion. Tyrion is carrying some mushrooms with him. They're poisonous mushrooms. He also thinks that he thinks about poisoning Jon Con, actually.
Yeah.
Which I forgot that he was genuinely thinking about killing him, and that seems like a bit of an overreaction. But and then comments that John Connington doesn't eat, Griff doesn't eat, which I don't really know what that means, if anything. So
I don't know. This whole chapter and this whole journey with this crew on the Shy Maid is very weird.
Well, it did make me wonder with Tyrion, going back to your question about being an unreliable narrator, we know that he's a heavy drinker for sure. So did he go through such a heavy patch of drinking where he also maybe took some sort of drugs as well, and this led to massive blackouts in his memory and just literal memory loss, and it mixes things up in his head from time to time. He's sober right now, which may be why things are coming back to him more ferociously, and things seem a bit trippy because this is real life. This is not, there's no drink to get you through this. Like, he's still very sharp logically at this stage, but Tyrion with wine brings us through the steps a bit more. Like, if you remember his political games, he would bring us through the steps a bit more. Sober Tyrion doesn't do that as much.
No, there's not as much humour. He's a lot darker. He's, I've said this before, Tyrion was always my favourite character up until him arriving in Essos, and it was like, oh God, I don't like this guy anymore. And yeah, I mean, he's not got his status anymore. He can't kind of hide behind the little lion thing, and
but he's more like a belligerent Inspector Morse in this chapter.
Yeah,
he's just like attacking Aegon. I know who you are. It's like, okay, great. Now that we, like, at the time I was like, oh my God, this is so exciting. But now
definitely.
Now it's just like, okay, Tyrion, pick the worst possible time. Maybe he just thought he was going to die, so he wanted everybody to realize how clever he was.
Well, it's a classic, you know, one of those chapters where it's almost like its own little play on its own, like its own standalone, you know, 20-minute Radio 4 play for today kind of thing. And the next one's a little bit like that as well.
So Connie says Tyrion, not a Joffrey murderer, but a Tywin murderer, and his mind is fried from drinking, and he's experiencing detox and PTSD. You know, there's every chance that Tyrion may have been, somebody may have been slipping Tyrion something as well. Like, Shay could have been slipping him something. There's every chance that was happening. Preston, I think I mentioned this before, has an excellent video on the fact that Joffrey may not have been the intended victim of the Purple Wedding, but Tyrion was, because it's actually, there's evidence to suggest that it's Tyrion's pie that is poisoned, not the wine. Because Joffrey chokes on the pie and drinks the wine to wash down the pie that he's choking on. So that's that, and it's Tyrion's pie that he's eating. I don't know. It's an interesting theory, if nothing else. But yeah, he's definitely could be going through detox and PTSD. And Sonny says Tyrion changes after he kills Shay and Tywin and finds out that Jaime lied to him. I agree, it's PTSD. Yeah, not just from the alcohol. That's true. It's a bit of an emotional sobering up going on here as well. So then we have
just one last thing.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
There's a few references throughout this series to different individuals who have experiences that could reference an Azor Ahai type moment. And we know that this isn't the end of Tyrion. At the end of this chapter, where he's going down and down and down, it feels like he's drowning. But we know that he survives that. Next week we find that out.
Yeah, spoiler alert. Next week's reading.
Yeah. I've just in my notes I've put river in the river. Could Tyrion have been reborn amidst salt and salt being like the water, and also the fog and all that kind of, and stone as in the stone men. So reborn amid salt and stone.
The way he talks about it as well, there's every chance that this place will look even like at the end of this series even better than King's Landing. If King's Landing gets destroyed, there's still a certain amount of, there's an eerie beauty about this place. I wonder will we get to come back here?
I don't know, maybe Daenerys will, who knows.
be interesting to see a dragon's point of view. Oh, if Daenerys flies over it. Oh, yes, please. So then we are on to Davos. I forgot to write down the number. Which Davos is this?
This is Davos 3.
Davos 3. Thank you very much. So Davos is with the Manderleys. The description of the Manderleys is just hilarious. They're talking about, like, especially when they say that they're talking about him smuggling out food and stealing from them and all this. And I thought when I was reading it, it said, it doesn't seem like you missed a meal, or it doesn't seem like you're any the worse off for missing a meal, or something like that. And I thought it would say he thought, but he did. He just said it out loud. It's like, I love Davos so much.
Oh, well, let me say, this is what I got from this chapter, and this is something that's been floating around my head for many years. We know that this is a farce. This whole thing is not real, and obviously Davos gets to find that out later on behind the scenes. It's all a bit of a show put on for the phrase. So it's a performance, and within this performance, we've got characters called Rhaegar, Leona, and Wyler, and you've got a girl who's got a dyed hair, so possibly denoting that about people being in disguise, and you also have a couple of references from Wyman Manderley himself about, do you want us to send you to the Silent Sisters? In that, I get the impression that somebody has been sent to the Silent Sisters for knowing something
from
or
a
for
previous
saying something.
chapter.
Yeah. So that's quite interesting. I think you could interpret that a number of different ways, depending on where you land on the whole R plus L equals J.
I do think Sept and Lemore is a Shara Dane. I am in that camp. So yeah, I like the idea that her name is Wyla as well, and that is the threat throughout this chapter.
Yeah,
because it is like, do you remember Septa Lemore? Do you remember?
Yeah.
Just before we move on with this chapter, Shayna says the gems in Sansa's hairnet are black, not purple. They sit in a web of silver. It sounds like a black widow, not purple serpents. And why was Tywin on the privy? Widow's blood poison. Yeah, there's lots there's lots of theories floating around that maybe the target for the Tyrells was Tyrion to sow dissent, that Tywin was maybe the one who was trying to poison Tyrion. That's just, this whole thing with Sansa may not be anything at all. There's lots of theories about that. Elamore, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your weekend and your Halloween. But yeah, so back to Davos and the Manderleys. So yeah, I really like Wyla. She's great. She is great.
No, kill the king. Vengeance. Yes, let's have our vengeance. What about the promise? So
I think her and Arya would be great friends.
They would be brilliant friends. And what's her face on Bear Island?
Lyanna.
Yeah. So there's just at the very beginning of this chapter, there's a fair amount of imagery and description of the merman's court at White Harbour in the hall. So there's I think it's a tapestry or something like that up in the wall that's of a massive kraken fighting a leviathan. Very poetic, the description of when poor Davos is trying to be confident enough to sort of he keeps thinking, oh, they should have sent somebody else. I'm not up to the job here. I can't do this. And when he describes who he is, I have titles too, and I think it's Wyler or Leona, who turns round and says, an admiral without ships, a hand without fingers, who serves a king without a throne. And they describe Davos as an onion of ill omen. I mean, poor Davos. Poor Davos. But he holds his own and he blames the phrase. He calls Tommen a usurper. All of this stuff is rebuked, obviously, by the Manderleys, and they're very, we know we're good and lawful people here at White Harbour. Don't be dragging us into, what did Stannis ever do for us? He's just a beaten cur who's begging for alms, and he can't offer us anything. And then it changes when Davos says, well, we can offer you the chance to do your duty. And I think that phrase itself is the thing that, at that point, I don't think Wyman Manderley was desperate to kind of like, let's have a conversation. I think he was trying to judge what was going on here. And I think at the point where Davos says, this is the chance to do your duty, that Wyman thinks, yeah, okay, he's at, we'll trust him. We'll, yeah.
The fingers, Davos's fingers. I have been for along with a lot of people. I think even Ella Moore has asked this. It's overkill to take Davos's fingers at the siege, and it's supposed to be, a symbol of Stannis being a man of duty and justice and all that kind of thing. This is the first time kind of twigged with me, actually, whether there's another big story beyond that or not, whether there was something more to him smuggling onions or not. The fact that forevermore he can take off his gloves and show this is a very strong sign of what both of them are capable of and what both of them would do. Like, it's one thing, like words are wind. He doesn't need to be fancy hand, educated, landed knight, anything like that. As soon as that glove comes off and he shows the fingers, it's like, well, there you go. How many more men can do that? It's like it's like all the stories that we'll get later with Jon and certain wildlings, with the guy's eye getting eaten out by crows and all that kind of thing. There's a lot of people step forward, and just by looking at them, it's like, oh, okay, this is somebody we don't mess with. I'm just sorry, I'm going back to my notes about the Silent Sisters, and it's a couple of times that it's referenced, this threat of like, shut up, Wyler, or you'll be sent to the Silent Sisters. And then later on, when Rhaegar Frey is talking about how, even if you sat on the fence here, then there is still Sansa Stark. Pledge your allegiance to her. She's going to be marrying Ramsay Snow, so give them your allegiance. It still doesn't mess around with this promise that you made, or whatever. That you're the Stark's men. You can still kind of be the Stark's men. And Wyler's kind of still protesting in the background, and Wyman is sort of apologising for her and saying, she's always been a willful child, and their response is marriage will soften her, or the Silent Sisters. And there's this feeling of a willful female child or a willful young woman in the past, in this story, has been sent to the Silent Sisters because she's a liability, but also they don't want her dead. They just literally want to silence her. She needs to be a silent sister. And I don't know who that could be, because I'm like, but my brain's going, Lyanna, but it's no, that's not, no, it can't possibly be. I actually, the Lyanna stuff, it's interesting you say that, but for the fact that she's a crypt, it's something that we don't hear get postured.
No.
Postured, what's the word? Anyway, a lot of people don't say it. Is she? Thank you. Is she alive? Like, this is a lot of things. Like, people have so many tinfoil theories. That's like seems to be one of those characters that's we're not allowed to ever question whether she's alive or not. It seems so obvious that she's dead. But yeah, maybe she is. I mean, I think she is. But it would be interesting. I do think that Joanna Lannister is probably somebody that's been sent. Oh, there's Connie, Joanna Ashara, yeah, and I think Joanna Ashara. He does things in threes. We have Euron Crow's Eye. We have this Crow Eye among the Crow's Eye guy whose eye was eaten by the crows. We have Blood Raven. We have like things happen in threes in A Song of Ice and Fire. So there's every chance there could be a third person out there.
Maybe even Rhaella. Yeah, who knows?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me if we end up with somebody being sent to the Silent Sisters as well. At the end.
Or I think probably more likely that we discover somebody who was sent there. Either, I mean, if it could be Ashara Dane is Sept Lemore, but previous to that, she was hiding as part of the Silent Sisters. You know, there's a number of. I just think that that's a big clue. At some point in the past, a willful child to silence her, and literally she needed to become a Silent Sister. Like, zip it. We don't want to kill you, but we're going to have to send you away because you'd literally just too much. You're a loose cannon. You're too much of a liability. As loyal as you are, and as you know, committed to the cause as you are, you're just not. You need to play the game, and you can't. So you're going to have to go away.
Connie also suggests Lioness Hightower, or Lyness Hightower. I should say, not Lioness. Lyness Hightower. Here, bear man, good luck with our brat. Yeah. That's a good point, maybe. Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think it's mentioned too much for it not to be a factor later on. Because it happens so much in our own world. And again, George grew up in the Catholic tradition, so that's everybody has a story of somebody being sent off to a laundry or to somebody joining the Poor Clares or a silent order or something like that. There's always, like, not necessarily forced, but certainly there are stories like that. Septa Shayna says when Rhaella leaves King's Landing, Jaime notes he could not see her face because she was cloaked. It'd be great if she was alive. That would be interesting.
Maybe sure. It's just like that. There's got to be something in that the three main characters in this performance at White Harbour are called Rhaegar, Leona, and Wyler.
Could Rhaella be Septa Lemore, or is she too old?
No, I think she would be in her 40s, wouldn't she?
Because it would make sense that she would be with them.
Yeah.
More probably than a Chardane. Unless you go with the Order of the Green Hand.
Yeah.
Or plus L equals A. Yeah, but it would make sense if it was Rhaella for sure.
I did like the bit where Davos noticed that when the Freys were talking about how horrible the young... It's like, this is all the young wolf's fault. Even the Red Wedding, it was all his fault. You know, him and all his young lords, like, walked into animals. And in fact, we're told here, and everyone seems to agree that this is a fact, that when a warg bites another warg, it's like it's like a zombie bite or something. You then become, a werewolf. Yeah, you then become a warg. And the funny thing is, while this is all going on, and kind of Manderley sort of turning around and agreeing with them that the young wolf was terrible and led them down the wrong path, that he's got this expression on his face like he just wants to crush him like a cockroach. But at the same time, he's kind of having to agree with him as part of this whole farce thing. So one question I've got to ask about this chapter is the promise that's referenced. This 1,000 years ago, a promise was made. They lost their home and the wolves took them in, and they swore to always be Stark men. Is there something else to this promise?
I think there must be. And I wonder, does it have anything to do with the fact that the Manderleys seem very wealthy? Extremely wealthy. Like, are they... Like, will this be the source? Is this what's going to keep the North going? Because we go from starvation to literal gluttony.
Yeah.
It's just so unusual in all of Westeros. I mean, Illyrio's Illyrio's really the only other person that is that overweight, right? And they're all overweight.
Yeah, they are. They're all big boys, aren't they? The Manderleys.
And the women as well. Like, they're all like red cheeked and chubby.
I don't know. I mean, so the wolves took them in and gave them land. I mean, it's a rich area. You know, there's a harbour and a thriving economy going on there. They've got a ton of war cogs and ships and things that are being made, but they still worship the new gods. So they weren't, I don't know, some sort of agreement over something that was, it wasn't just like, oh, thanks very much for helping us out, we are now going to officially promise that we are your men. There just seems to be something more to it, and the fact that it was 1,000 years ago as well.
Do you think it might be a religious pact as well?
Could be. Maybe it is this, like, I don't know, maybe if my weird theory is true, and again, this is just a massive hunch. I haven't got a massive amount of proof for it, apart from like rainbow reflections on the wall and rainbow crystals and things. But that whole notion of hiding the old religion inside the new religion, so that people who are worshipping the new gods are actually, unbeknownst to them, worshipping the old gods, and that's what keeps the North strong and the ice magic strong, and, you know, who knows. But maybe that's got something to do with it, some sort of pact between, like, we will hide our religion inside your religion.
Maybe, yeah. I think it makes sense. I think that religions often hide within one another, even in our own world. But they often, like,
just merge. And yeah.
I mean, it is just to pass, like, for the most part, religion, it was to pass on moral authority as well. Just so that we can have civilized societies.
So control, power, control, if there's elements of magic in that as well. You know, opiate of the masses, that it just, maybe there was something to do with that. I hadn't thought about religion, but yeah.
Just with the warging biting one another, do you think there is anything in that? Do you think there is anything, not necessarily that a warg would pass on their wargness, if you like, but will we see werewolves of some sort? Because the one thing that is kind of like, warging is as close as we get to werewolves, but it's not really shape-shifting. Like, we see face shifting, but not shape shifting. So
I'm not sure. Don't know. That would be interesting.
Would, yeah. I like an owl werewolf. Oh my god, my nephew, my oldest nephew, he's 6. He went as a werewolf to school. Like, the mask, the clothes ripped, is the cutest bloody thing. Oh my god, so cute. And the other fellow went as Mr. Bones. Super creepy. This really creepy, like, top hat and like tails and like this, like, half a. He actually looked like the Thanes in Game of Thrones. With the thing. Like, what is I saw some people post like their kids going to the Halloween parties as dead school children.
Oh my God.
Yeah, like
it's
5
a different level these days. Yeah.
God, like we wore black sacks and hats made out of sugar paper.
Yeah.
Costume, black plastic bag. You might have had a bit of rope.
Mind you, having said that, the collaboration for the nail polish side of things and social media it's actually quite creepy this year, because Halloween it's usually like cute and all like cute spiders and cobwebs and cute witches and stuff. This is like quite sinister.
I went over the top, I have to say. I'm demanding allegiance from everybody. I wore a crown.
I've still got to film mine yet, but I'm looking forward to it. I've been backwards and forwards about the 5. So yeah. Anyway, sorry, I'm taking that right off track there. But
polish now and afterlife polish. Anyway, yeah. So anything else then from Davos?
No.
Yeah, I didn't have a huge amount. I think it's the next chapter. It's going to be
really looking forward to the next chapter, and it's going to be a while because it's not not next week anyway.
Not for a while, yeah. It's 2 weeks, maybe not that long. Then we have Reek. It rhymes with squeak.
Yes, and so this is the chapter where he gets the Ironborn to yield Moat Cailin to serve it up very easily to Ramsay.
Sorry, yeah, I said Dreadfort earlier on. Of course, Moat Cailin, I meant to say. Yeah.
I've got a couple of questions here straight away. Do you think that the Reeds are protecting Moat Cailin somehow? Are they in the bogs? Are they? I mean, there's this reference to bog devils, but are they in the picture?
There's something not quite right with the basement flooding and the white snakes.
Yeah,
like that sounds like there's weirwoods.
Yeah,
there's weirwood roots coming up around Moat Cailin. I don't think there's something mysterious going on, because like Theon as Reek like he's there 2 minutes and he says, oh, they're already fucked. Like how are they keeping this together? And even he as Reek is able to say, oh, let's just leave the corpse to be the security. Because why not? Which is, I wonder, is that foreshadowing? The corpse is security, the corpse taking Moat Cailin, like dead taking Moat Cailin. Like is that
it could be.
I mean, the Ironborn of they're really fecked in that place. Really gross chapter, actually. The idea that they're eating one another, and just leaving bodies to rot where they die, and like we're seeing this through a guy who has had his penis cut off. He's had his fingers cut off.
It's got to be, hasn't it? It's never really like officially confirmed in the books. They made it seem pretty obvious, I think, in the TV show. But the quote is that he's scared that if he doesn't do a good job, you know, that Ramsay will take, quote, fingers, toes, and that other thing. Oh, I mean, I mean,
it sounds like he's already taken it.
Yeah.
Which is why, in a way, there's something. But like as like Reek, as low as he is, and like in the last chapter he saw him eating rats, he's been able to see how bad things are here. That you don't just leave the dead where they, like that you don't just leave them there. At least give them to the water, do something with them. But yeah, I even like he has nothing left to lose. He thinks, oh, better to die here than go back to Ramsay. But there's a certain amount of fearlessness that comes with that.
Just very briefly, just like a millisecond will just bristle through him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every now and again, it's like he's sharp. He's Theon. It's like, it doesn't take him that long to snap back.
No.
It makes me wonder, had Theon had the right direction, what could he become? Like, he could have been really great.
Yeah, but it's fear. It's just complete fear. Even that defiance, that momentary defiance that he has, and that it's a real. The description is really powerful. That he feels it up his, like you can feel this like flash up his backbone and things. This feeling of like, remember who you're the son of Balon Greyjoy, and then it's gone within a second of him immediately thinking, remember your name, remember who you are, remember what he'll do to you, and he's just this he's kind of trapped. But you
could certainly read this chapter and still think it's not Theon.
Yeah, you could
certainly do that. Because he talks about him having white hair and no one recognize him. And this has all happened in the space of 18 months, I suppose, or maybe close to 2 years, all of this trauma to Theon. And it happens. I know somebody in my own family who had a traumatic experience and they went white within a year and they were 30. Yeah. So it can happen. But
I wish they'd have done that to Alfie Allen in the TV show. It wouldn't have taken that much effort, but just to show how traumatic it was.
I suppose we don't have as much time to build him back up, maybe, or maybe TV watchers wouldn't buy a strong Theon later on.
Maybe. What's wrong with the water around Moat Cailin? I mean, the obvious thing is it's probably full of dead bodies and kind of poisonous just from that.
But where are dead bodies coming from?
I don't. Well, are there bodies in the water, or am I getting that mixed up with the Tyrion chapter?
I think they left some bodies in the basement,
right?
But they definitely said that they had to bring in ale to drink.
They couldn't drink the water, which is why they were all just completely in a complete mess, just because they were just all hung over constantly, like every single day, and rotting away. It was rotting them. But they couldn't drink the water, and even Reek / Theon at the beginning of the chapter, when he sees the scene, is like, "You're Ironborn, for God's sake, why don't you just throw yourselves into the water and give yourselves to the drowned god?" And they're like, "There is no drowned god here." So there's something different and poisonous about the water around that area.
Will this lead us to more information about the Boltons? Is there something unnatural that they've done?
Yeah, or it could just be a defense thing from the Reeds. Maybe they're doing something to poison the water.
Or it could be that the Boltons have some way of filtering the water that the army just don't know.
Maybe.
And that's a way of like making sure that if someone does take it over, they won't keep it for long, because they will just die of whatever bad diseases are in there, dehydration or whatever. I mean, it was only quite recently that people even drank water. Most people drank tea and stuff like that. Like drinking water wasn't common. It wasn't that common. Like ale was way more common. But hello, Kat. How are you? Kat, I promise I'm getting on that polish. I swear. I haven't.
Oh, hi, Kat. Hi.
Lots of artist nails videos coming up tomorrow on Thursday. So Reek then. Anything else then with this chapter? There wasn't a huge amount for me in this chapter. Really, just the stuff within the castle. After that, I didn't really.
Did you notice? I don't know what it is about me and numbers, because I'm not really that into maths or anything like that, but there's exactly the same number of men of Ironborn that yielded Moat Cailin and gave up gave up their position and went off with Theon. Exactly the same number, 63. Originally 65, and then Theon's like, oh, and then there was this person, but ultimately it ended up being 63 Ironborn that marched out of, or dragged themselves out, carried each other out of Moat Cailin, and that's exactly the same number of wildlings that ended up going back to the wall with Jon to defend the wall.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I was thinking, I was like 63. That's what it says in the next chapter. Oh, yeah, I thought that.
Strange coincidence. I mean, they're all pretty much doomed, but or are they? I mean, we know that the Ironborn are, I think, aren't they? Doesn't he just kill them later on? I don't think I just certainly don't think he lets them just get on a boat and go back to the Iron Islands. But I don't know what happens to the 63 wildlings either. It's just strange that it's like exactly the same number of like dispossessed people.
I did notice Reek saying that he still had 7 fingers, and 7 is a lucky number, or is a sacred number. Which I thought, maybe you're the drown god guy. They've even changed your faith.
Yeah.
But the Boltons wouldn't.
No, they'd be north. Yeah.
So is that a 7? It's not the 7? Is the number 7 sacred to the Ironborn as well?
It could be.
Which just kind of maybe ties in with your idea that there's religions hiding within religions, maybe. I mean, the number 7 comes up again and again in religions of our own world as well. Sonny says that somebody said that Tywin would poison the water around Moat Cailin. Don't remember.
Maybe. So Theon is success. I mean, it really didn't take much to drag them out of there, but he gives Moat Cailin to Ramsay. Ramsay then offers Theon his freedom and then just sits there smiling at him to see what he'll actually do with this. Theon declares that he's no prince. He kind of denounces his Ironborn heritage. I'm Reek. And Ramsay says, we'll make a dog of you. And then at the very end of the chapter, they're joined by the Freys, and this is where we see Fat Walder and Fake Arya. But it's interesting that Theon observes that there's a real agelessness about Roose Bolton. He seems to have this ethereal, like his skin is really smooth, and he just seems to, I don't know, he's like the Cliff Richard of Westeros. There's an agelessness about him. Again, I suppose that's where you can...
That's your go-to. Like, I would think someone maybe like Paul Rudd.
Show my age. But they I guess this is where you can see where people come up with the lots of different theories about Roose Bolton, that he's somehow tied to the others, the whole thing with the leeches, and that the flayed men are somehow some sort of like lesser cousins to wargs, and they were always, you know, that's their way of trying to skin change into another creature or another human being. It's just, there's something weird about all of that. I don't know if it's as obvious as, you know, I think it was James and LaDonna years ago, James, who was saying that he had a theory that Roose Bolton was the Night's King's son or something like that. Yeah. And that he's somehow like he's got some sort of eternal soul, and you know, he can discard one body and then inhabit another, and there's something to do with the babies, and who knows. That just sounds a bit too far out to me, but there is just, there's something strange about him. Definitely.
No, I think that's again like we've got kind of allusions to the two big missing supernatural creatures, vampires and werewolves, in this chapter, and they are mortal enemies in mythology. So it would, like, that is Stark and Bolton, you know, your werewolf and vampire. That's what they represent. We probably won't see them.
Yeah,
that's what they definitely represent.
Yeah.
We used to, when we watched Twilight. We got drunk and watched Twilight one night, and we could never remember the names of the guy that was the vampire and the guy that was the werewolf. So we used to end up calling them Ice Dick and Fiery Dick. Because we couldn't remember. It's like, she's after the ice one or the fiery one. And then, like, this is when we were first going out. This is the kind of weird conversations it takes if you want to marry me, right? To have weird conversations. Which would be better?
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, but that is what you get with the Stark Bolton thing. It is like,
it is, isn't it? Yeah, vampires and werewolves, you're right. It's definitely rooted in that arena.
Who's the Van Helsing character then?
Oh god.
Definitely, like,
Davos,
most movies. Yeah, most movies would come down. It would be that Davos, right? Because most movies and most, like, stories where they pit werewolves against vampires comes down on the side of the werewolves as being on the side of good.
Yeah.
And vampires being on the side of evil. So that's certainly the way it is with Bolton and Stark. Yeah. The werewolves aren't purely good, but they're
not as bad as the vampires.
They're not as bad as the vampires.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So, I mean, not a great deal going on there, apart from, again, politically and geographically. Yeah, there's a castle that's been given up there, and
but again,
Theon's moved from the depths of the dungeons at the Dreadfort into the kennels, scrapping over bits of meat with the dogs.
But there's also, like, the thing with Reek, even after he swears, you know, he's still Reek and all that kind of thing, he instantly knows that it's Jane Westerling.
Yeah.
That it's not Arya, that Arya would never do this. So there's still a fierce identity within him that is not going anywhere. So I have great hopes for Theon. I still think he's going to be there's interesting things in store for him.
Fingers crossed.
He's on a great redemption arc for sure.
Well, he certainly suffered a lot.
Yeah. So then we're on to John 5, and this is a really difficult chapter to read in some ways. Just the struggle for food and even just the description of that woman's food.
Yeah,
rolling in the mud and the flour going everywhere. It's just the desperation that these wildlings and John doesn't want to have to do what he has to do, but he needs to get them to come with him. And yeah, I'm really interested in what you think about the drunken tree and the wildlings carving faces now. And it made me wonder, is this so? According to the show, the children created the others, which they haven't revealed in the books yet, but if that's what they're going to do with the books. But it does seem to me it would be I don't really trust the children anyway, so it would be a useful way for hey Lady Laura, how are you? It would be a useful way for the children to repopulate Westeros with their religion by forcing the men that believe in them or believe in the old gods down south to start spreading, like start carving in faces again. I don't know if the children can. Yeah,
they're all, they're in a state of real desperation. They're dispossessed. They're it almost feels like some sort of prisoner of war camp at Molestown in this scene. But at the same time, even though they're going through this extreme hardship, they've still got time to do something that they feel is crucially important, which is to establish their religion again.
But can
wherever
the
it is they are,
children use those trees once they've been carved, or can Bloodraven use a tree that's been carved, or is it like, is it like blessing holy water, or is it like blessing a cup of water and saying now that's holy? Like, is it holy, or does it have to be?
Who knows? It could be that because they're not Waywards, so and the description of the trees are the first one. There's three. So the first one is an ash tree, then there's a chestnut tree, and then the scary one at the end with the expression on its face. The scary expression is a massive oak tree.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether or not because to me, the fact that Mormont's raven was kind of sat inside the mouth of this massive oak tree, wasn't there a description of some blood as well, or am I just imagining
this chapter?
Yeah,
I don't remember that.
I get the impression that some form of sacrifice has been made or has to be made, and then that somehow triggers this totem to then become some sort of magical conduit for the children, and then they now can see what's going on and what's happening.
Yeah, it would be a really clever way of repopulating Westeros by having this massive army push believers down south. It is interesting that it is kind of it's of enough importance for Jon to make note of it several times in this chapter. And to note that people aren't watching what the wildlings are doing, and that they almost to the point that they shouldn't be allowed to do this, but he still doesn't want to stop them having their faith. He doesn't want to, he's not asking them to change their faith, but he's still not totally comfortable with the idea that they're carving faces into trees. That shouldn't be happening. Sonny asks a question about food. When the wildlings started to move south, how did they plan on feeding themselves? Sonny, this is an excellent question, because I don't really know how they were going. Were they just going to pillage? I guess they were just going to raid. And it could be that they thought, because hunting was becoming much more difficult in the north, I spoke about this before, they may have just thought, well, if we move south, we'll literally be just following the animals. They must have gone south.
Yeah.
Because that's what happens in a Game of Thrones, right? They comment on animals moving south, I believe. So there's every chance that they thought they'd be able to raid and hunt. But they're not being allowed to do either of those things. But at the same time, they were also depending a lot on Mance to lead the way. And what was Mance going to do? Because I don't think Mance would have just raided indefinitely.
No, I think he would have wanted to win some castles, establish a bit of a foothold in the north, and then spread further down south.
That's what, if anyone's watching Vikings, that's what the Vikings wanted. They would start by raiding, but eventually they wanted to create enough of a threat that they could bargain or make a deal with the Brits and the Francos, or whatever they were calling them, that they could get some land in return for not raiding.
Do you think there's any significance between the choice of apple or onion?
Yeah, it's not much of a choice.
Not really.
I mean, neither will sustain you for very long. Especially withered apple.
Well, onion is the Onion Knight. That's Stannis. Apple. I suppose the choice, because the choice in the previous chapter about what to do with the wildlings, either Stannis takes them on his march to Deepwood Motte or wherever he's ending up, or they station those castles on the wall and defend the wall. But how is Jon related to apple? I don't know. Apple or onion. I don't know.
I don't even know why that's the choice. I mean, how do you even grow apples in the north, that far north?
Don't know.
I mean, I know apples grow everywhere. They're not difficult to grow, but I feel like maybe potato. They probably wouldn't have potatoes, but I don't know. It seems like an odd choice for sure. There is probably symbolism there. Onions have layers. Maybe it's donkey. I don't know. Sunny says 100,000 people won't feed themselves by raiding. That's just too many people. Is it 100,000 in the book though?
Well, I mean,
I can't remember if it's 100,000 in the book, and I don't think Mance ever thought that all of 100,000 would get through.
No, and John does talk about 1,000 wildlings being at the wall. If there was 100,000 people anywhere near the proximity of the wall, that's the most that's ever been anywhere near the wall, or that could man the wall, or that could defend the north against the others. I don't think it's that big. I don't think I don't think they didn't all make it, or some of them decided, look, this is just, no, sorry, we're going back home.
It is a good point. I mean, if you think in terms of the Vikings, they would never have launched that many numbers in a raid. It's just not, you can't control that many people on a raid, that's for sure. Lady Laura's in and out today. She's an apple pie in the oven. Apple pie or onion pie? Which is enjoy your apple pie and ice cream. That sounds lovely.
That's making me hungry.
That's the one thing I miss about giving up sugar. Apple tart.
Apple crumble. I love apple crumble.
Can't beat good apple. Oh, can't beat it. Especially in a cold winter's evening.
I used to do, and it's so much nicer than apple crumble actually, but pear crumble.
Oh my God. My mom used to make, this is like, we're going off on apple talk now, but just for a second. She used to make this, it was apples, right? Slightly stewed, not fully stewed like you would for a tart, right? And they were cooked in a sponge, a very thin sponge, right? And then, or was that pastry? No, that was the apple cake, sorry. And then she had another thing where it was like, it was pastry, then stewed apple, then custard, and then like a meringue on top.
Oh my God.
And it was absolutely delicious.
Oh, that sounds delightful.
It was the nicest thing.
That's it. I'm really hungry now.
Apple or onion, Claire? Which would you choose, actually? I'd probably choose the onion.
Yeah, I might choose the onion just for flavouring the old boots that are around or whatever. Who knows? Because
I feel like an onion as well, you wouldn't eat it as fast as you'd eat an apple. Also, it seemed to keep Stannis' army going.
That's true. Yeah, it did. Yeah, or something did. Yeah,
like an apple
eating their arms and things. Yeah.
Also, onions are probably better if you want to keep off infection.
But it does seem like some sort
Lady Laura has invited us over for dessert and coffee. We're there.
Yeah, definitely. It does seem like some harsh sort of prisoner of war camp though. And it's like, and one of them says, it's all right for you, you've got this good thing going up at the wall where there seems to be no lack of food for the night's watch, and yet we're rolling around in the mud trying to fight over bits of withered apples, and it's true, he is being quite harsh, but I suppose this is fueled by, again, this mounting dissent from Bowen Marsh about winter's come in, we would be all right for a few years, but oh my God, you've just brought a whole load of unwanted mouths for us to feed, and actually this is our old enemy. What the fuck? Yeah. So I can kind of see where he's coming from. There's also, he's still in a very, very vulnerable position, and he misses. There are times when he really does miss Sam, and he really misses the counsel of Maester Aemon. And he, you know, I don't know, maybe this is why he feels that he has to kind of muster the wildlings around him, just like safety in numbers.
But do you not think that not talking to his brothers and isolating himself is his biggest problem? Like, he doesn't sit down and he doesn't have lunch with anyone anymore. Like, they don't see the threats that he sees. They haven't seen, a lot of them haven't seen the whites. It's not that they don't believe it, but it's like, we're on the wall. Like, we kept out Mance Raider. Like, we'll be fine. Like, what are you talking about? They don't get the threat. And like, they need a conclave where they can bring together like the wildling leaders that know exactly what's out there and can explain it to them. And, you know, the brothers that have seen this as well. It's just, I also wanted to know, I think it might actually be in the previous chapter. Maybe it's not even in this one. No, it is in this one. He says to Bowen Marsh that, you know, why do you keep going on about the wildlings? Your own brothers took out Mormont, you know. If you don't know what Mormont would say if he was here, you know. And I was wondering, like, is that like almost tempting fate by putting that out there?
Yeah.
Or that brothers can take down their Lord Commander if they need to.
Yeah, that was a little bit too much to let slip, I think. Yeah.
Lady Laura says we could have tea either. If we
go tea and dessert. Yeah, I'm actually, this makes me feel as though I'm eating dessert, because they've got some really nice flavoured spring water in Tesco's at the moment, but this is like rhubarb.
Oh.
Rhubarb flavoured spring water, and it is really like drinking. It's like rhubarb, like liquid rhubarb. It's really nice. So it's making me feel as though I'm having rhubarb crumble.
So I think that was it that I had. It was really about the trees that I was interested in this week.
Yeah.
And I think Bowen Marsh has a point. The brothers are criminals. They're not like John seems to think that they're these loyal men that will stay loyal no matter what. And they're going to start raping these women as soon as they get to the wall. Oh, well, if that happens, the women can handle themselves. Really? Can a 12-year-old handle herself? It seems a little bit, I don't know.
He's not done a risk assessment, has he? That's the problem. How far do you think this network of underground tunnels go, I wonder? Because it seems like there's a whole different world going on underground up north. There's this what seems like massive stretch of networks and tunnels underneath Moat Cailin, where people are surviving fairly adequately. Does this link to the Gendal's tunnels? Is there a way of getting from one place to the other under the surface of the snow? And you know, does that mean that winter doesn't affect people as much in a way? It's interesting that a feature of this small, didn't feel like a great deal of stuff was going on chapter, that we get to hear again about this network of underground tunnels somewhere near the wall up north. Interesting. I wonder if it stretches to the wall and beyond.
In my home city of Kilkenny, there are tunnels that stretch all the way from the castle in the centre, which was built around the 11th century. They stretch. They're rumored to stretch as far as 15 miles away.
Wow.
So, apparently, there's a tunnel to every major medieval site that was set up for defence, but also for servants and things like that. private trysts and all that kind of thing. I think there's only 1 or 2 of them open now, but they know that they're there for sure. So it would have been something that a lot of major castles, it would make sense as well for if there's such hardwired pacts among Northerners, it would make sense that someone would come up with the idea, do you know what, let's just build tunnels so in the winter we can get to and from one another very easily. It would also make sense if people forgot about that stuff.
Yeah.
Just grew less harsh and they just said it's not that, it's as much hassle to go down underground as it is to go overground at this rate. So we'll just it's easy for people to forget about these things.
Interesting, though, that there's potentially a whole sort of subculture going on underground that we just get hints of from time to time, like Gendel and these kind of underground hot water springs in Winterfell. And now we get this network of underground tunnels underneath Molestown. You know, it's not just a cellar, and it's an extended network. A network usually means that there's a beginning and an end point, and the joining, you know, it's joining one thing to another. But yeah, it was just an interesting point that came up in that chapter. And again, just as I mentioned before, the people that came forward were mainly, especially at the beginning, were mainly children that stepped forward to, you know, it was all like John wasn't going to turn them away. And that, you know, he had this rule of like any boy over 12, and then a wildling girl stepped forward, and it was like, well, you have to be 16 if you're a girl, you know. So there was this kind of equality gender kind of power thing going on.
And interestingly, he may not have accepted her but for the fact that he had Arya in his mind when he saw her. And just with the Bran chapter as well, the children reminding Bran of Arya, and then a child stepping forward to remind Jon of Arya, and almost to remind the reader, remember Arya, remember, because we will be back with Arya later, but just in case you forgot about her, Arya. Just keep her in mind.
Just keep thinking about her. Connie must be back from the grocery store. Either that or she's texting from the frozen foods section. People finding abandoned Children of the Forest underground hideouts. Maybe. I mean, that there is this whole subterranean civilization. There may be smaller numbers now, but it wasn't always that way. And they did inhabit that land before anybody else, by the sound of it, before even the Age of Heroes and the first, before all of them, they were the original inhabitants. So why wouldn't they? And maybe it is left over from that, and we're just kind of stumbling onto this from time to time.
It's amazing what can get lost to history quite quickly. Newgrange in Ireland, which is older than the pyramids, it's a fantastic structure. Just all those kind of Celtic symbols that we get, a lot of them were found originally, or at least they originate from Newgrange. It's a fantastic stone structure, but it was lost for years. And if you go around Ireland, you'll often see like rolling hills, and there's probably forts and stuff under that, and just people, I need to feed my cows, I need my cows to have somewhere to eat, so I'm just going to throw them out there, and things just get lost over time, very quickly. Even intricate things like tunnels.
Well, there was, when I lived in London way back, sort of early 2000s, I lived in London for about 5 years, and I used to have to get the tube quite regularly, daily, to work. And I lived in North London and worked in South London. So it was quite a long tube journey every morning. And for Christmas one year, Stuart bought me a book of I think they call them ghost stations. They're like secret underground London Underground tube stations that were used or were built but never opened, or were bombed in the war, or they'd shut down in another station. There's quite a few of them, and the only town I used to be obsessed with, when you're on the tube and it's literally just the wall that you can, as you're going past, you can you're very closed into the wall. And then every now and again, you can just hear the sound change slightly. And you'll just see, just for about a half a second, you can see the outline of like the shadow or the outline of a platform.
Really?
And the name on the wall. Yeah, there's a few.
I know that is there one near the Churchill War Rooms or something?
Yes, there's one near there. Baker Street, I think there may be one near there. There's one near the one of like the British Museum. There's one near the British Museum, and there's a couple. I know there's quite a few on the Northern Line, because I used to travel on the Northern Line from Finchley to Charing Cross, and then I'd have to get another trip. It was a long ass journey, but along that journey there were some of these ghost stations, and I used to just like look out for them every morning. Just like it'd be gone poof, in a second as you were going past really slowly. But yeah, they're still. I mean, I think they do tours and things like that. Where you can go and see these old abandoned ghost stations. But they're not. They're not on the map anymore. People don't realise they're there. Nobody, people have forgotten the names.
Yeah, you have to Lady Laura says she'd love to live somewhere where milk and butter and eggs weren't mass produced. We do. Yeah. People just get on with it over here. It's just one of those things. There's a good field. Affect the tens of thousands of years of history. We're going to just start. That's what happens. It has to. But yeah. So your mum is very lucky to have you, Lady Laura, and all your apple pies and cups of tea and coffee. I'm fascinated by the London Underground. Actually, I love documentaries on the London Underground. It's interesting when you think that the last public hanging, people went to it on the tube. Isn't that right?
Yes,
people took the tube to it.
Yeah,
the tube's been around a long time.
Long time.
But that's it for John 5 anyway.
That's it. I was about to turn over the page to see me notes for the next chapter, but that's it for the week. Yeah.
When we cut it down, the chapters got easier to talk about.
Yes, they did. Although, however, I always make a note of the chapters that I've got audio coming up, the next 5 for the week, the chapter names, but also the length of the chapters, because I try and kind of fit it around. That one's only 24 minutes, so not that they're ever that short. But next week we've got a couple of really quite long chapters. The Tyrion the first the sandwich. The first bit is Tyrion, and that's a 52-minute chapter, and usually the chapters on average are about 30.
That's long.
5 minutes. That's a long one. Yeah. And the Wayward Bride, the Asher chapter, is 57 minutes. That's like an hour of listening to the chapter. So like, for example,
is this going to be the one where she's already battling Stannis? No, it's not that.
This is the one where she's is it the Glovers and Deepwood Motte?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and there's a big battle at the end in the forest.
That's the battle I'm thinking of. Yeah. Well, that's it then. Yeah. So Tyrion 6 to the Wayward Bride for next Sunday. So we will see you all then. Thank you so much for joining us as usual, and have a great week, everybody, and a great Halloween.
Oh yes,
Happy Halloween to everybody. Yes,
happy Halloween.
Okay. Bye.